Hello, hello.
What up, though? What up, though?
Welcome to
Blazing
Blaze and
Soul
Soul
Podcast.
Podcast.
Back in business.
Yes.
Here every Wednesday, once again, talk about current events, what's happening in the Black and Asian communities, shed light on community leaders, role models, and just kind of give you a take of, our opinions. The past year was trying, to say the least, for most of us, but especially for Black and Asians, because of the vitriol that, kind of was spewed when it came to people of color. So we're here to kind of break the myths, stereotypes, and just have a little fun.
Yes.
Today's, I guess, initial topic is troubling, to say the least. We're bringing on Dr. Forrest, who is a psychologist of many, I guess, specialties to kind of talk about this. But the gentleman who murdered many individuals at the spa is kind of the big topic going on right now because it just happened. It's fresh in our minds, and everybody has a different kind of take and viewpoint of what actually happened. First, let me say my viewpoint is that number one, it was a horrific event. He should be. I hear a lot of people saying, "Well, he's mentally ill," and there were a lot of things going on in his life. I kind of take exception with that for the simple fact of, and I don't want to make this a racial thing, but number one, there was Asians that seemed like they were targeted, even though they say this wasn't a hate crime, that it was targeted. Two, it seems like it's a different position that the media and law enforcement takes in a situation like this. When, to be quite honest, in my opinion, if it was a person of color, it would have been handled much differently, and the story that comes out will be completely different.
He's just having a bad day.
Yeah, he's having a bad day, and I heard he's like sexually frustrated and all of this nonsense. But if it was a person of color, they'd have been a thug. He would have been prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Low life.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been taken so easily. There's many different thoughts that kind of go into my mind when not only I read and see the facts, but then I see the story take shape in the media. Go ahead.
Yeah, and and it hits home for me because just being Asian myself, and growing up having to deal with the racism, I've seen it firsthand. We don't know for sure if it was racially motivated, but it's just a coincidence that the rise in Asian brutality and anti-Asian groups are on the rise. And so we don't know if it's racially motivated, but me, firsthand, him just killing Asian people when, he skipped a couple of buildings. If he was having a bad day, hey, everybody in the way would have been a target. But for him to just target the Asian shops, and me personally having been a victim of racism and things like that for being Asian, and so I know what it's like. And there are people who really do hate us, and so whatever it is, I hope that, he gets prosecuted to the extent of the law, because he just took away 8 lives that unnecessarily. So today we're going to bring in Dr. Lennox Forrest. He is a clinical psychologist, and we're going to talk to him about what goes on behind the minds of these monsters that are murdering people over their hatred and whatever they're going through. Let's bring him on today, and we're going to start the discussion with him and kind of talk through this with him. So, Dr. Lennox Forrest.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, and I hope the two of you are, despite the tragic circumstances in Atlanta.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes. Very, very solemn and sad situation. We definitely wanted to discuss this, but we wanted to get a professional aspect or a professional voice to kind of talk about this as well, and go through, how something like this occurs, what goes through a person's mind, even though you're not privy because, he wasn't a patient of yours. You can shed a little bit of light into, kind of how this takes place. You sit there as a human being and you say, well, I wish no harm on anyone, but some way, somehow, this person gets to a point. Yeah, it gets to a point
take lives
where he wants to cause destruction on another. So, kind of give us your take on, initially, what was your initial response, or what was your initial thought process when you did hear about the reports of the massacre?
Well, first of all, I was very, very saddened to hear that lives have been lost. And Laura is a person of color.
Yes.
So she can really identify with this. When we look at serial killers, conventionally, we believe that a serial killer is someone who has killed at least 3 people.
Okay.
So this person fits the description.
Okay.
So when we look at serial killers, we tend to ask what's going on, what caused this, how can someone do such a horrific crime?
Right.
But here's the things that are very, very important when we're talking about serial killers. They tend to have early childhood trauma. Okay, so some of us call it ACEs. Okay, they experience certain traumatic experiences in their lives, such as physical abuse, sexual abuse, severe family dysfunction, emotionally distant parents, parents who were not present in their lives, especially emotionally. So that causes psychological effects on the child. But the most important thing about serial killers is the trauma that they have experienced in their lives. That's the single most important factor.
Okay.
And when we talk about trauma, it can be direct trauma. And here's what I mean by direct trauma. Someone gets hit by a car. So that's direct trauma. But someone watching that experiences indirect trauma.
Got it.
Okay? So there's a very significant difference. However, the common denominator is that there is trauma.
Right.
So these individuals, because they have experienced so much trauma, they tend to suppress their emotional response to the trauma. And they've never had someone to process that trauma, to help them to deal with it in ways that are effective, in ways that are appropriate. So that person kind of disconnects himself emotionally from others. So we can say that this individual becomes emotionally bankrupt. They're not able to identify with other people's feelings. Okay, so they have learned to suppress empathy. Or psychologically and biologically, the research says that some have suffered damage to certain areas of their brain that control emotional impulses. And we know that a specific area in the brain, which is called the amygdala, that helps people to respond appropriately to emotional situations. So that's one of the things, is that researchers believe that damage has been done to certain parts of the brain.
It's like football players.
Right.
Exactly. So trauma is very, very common with these individuals.
Now, let me ask you, I believe that in our own ways, everyone has dealt or had to deal with some type of trauma in their life. Now, to me, another person's trauma, in my estimation, might be trivial, but to them, it could be world-ending.
That's right.
But everyone does experience their own form of trauma in some way or form. My question is, how do you get from being unable to deal with your own traumatic experiences to taking that out on someone else? There's one thing for me to be depressed or feel solemn or feel hurt because of a given circumstance. It's another for me to want to hurt someone else because of my own hurt that I have. So how does a person of hopefully, a sane mind, a normal individual, goes from, not having dealt with their own problems to taking that out on someone else? And in such a large and all-encompassing way, because it wasn't like he got into an argument which triggered that, or these people were messing with him, so he thought he was going to fight back. But it was more of a something inside of me is wrong, so now I'm going to go and find people to take it out on. So how do you get to that point?
Well, you get to that point in the sense that an individual has seen so much trauma, which becomes normalized in their lives. Okay, so they're seeing a significant amount of trauma. So to that person,
that's normal.
Trauma is normal. This is a part of my everyday functioning. This is what I see. This is what I live. This is what I deal with every day. And then they have no one to give them appropriate interventions concerning the trauma that they have experienced. So you're seeing someone who is extremely angry. And we know that one of the most powerful emotions that God has put in us is the emotion of anger.
Sure.
And we also know that when people become so angry, the research says that for a split second, their brain short circuits, they go crazy.
Oh, wow.
So when someone gets to that level, and for example, they may call me to assess someone or evaluate someone who is extremely angry, one of the best things for me to say is that this person is unpredictable.
Wow.
I do not know what they might do, because that's how powerful anger is. So these individuals have so much internal anger, hostility, frustration, pent-up emotions that have never been dealt with effectively. And as a result, it spills over. These individuals tend to be loners. Having an appropriate relationship with someone is pretty much out of the realm of possibilities for these individuals because they've disconnected themselves from others. And obviously, that's not normal.
Right.
And these individuals, because of the trauma, especially physical trauma or sexual abuse trauma, where they have been put in a position where they have felt vulnerable. So they've lost all sense of control. So now they want to control things in their lives by taking it out on other people.
Wow. Wow. What do you, okay, so the media, as of right now, they're not positioning it as a hate crime. They're positioning it as, he had a bad day, he got fed up, it was too much.
Motivated.
Yeah, it was too much for him to bear, things of that nature. But it seems unusual that it seems like he was targeting Asian Americans, number one. Number two, he said he never had any problems with Asians. So
He said that?
yeah, when does the racial component fit into that?
Yeah.
That can fit in many different ways. we're dealing with a Caucasian male.
Yes.
So let me give a little bit of information before I completely answer your question. 76% of serial killers in the world are Americans.
Wow.
Okay, 76% of serial killers in the world are Americans. Now, obviously, that's not something that we should be proud of, by no means.
Not at all.
And 90% of serial killers are males. And 52% of them are white males.
Wow.
Okay, since 1982, 54% of high fatality events were caused by white men. While black males, the second most common perpetrators in terms of serial killings, committed 16%. So that's a huge discrepancy.
Huge.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. Yes. Now, what are some of the factors behind this? Toxic masculinity, misogyny, hatred of women. And what the research says is that these serial killers, one of the factors is that their mothers were absent or their mothers weren't available emotionally.
Wow.
And we know that when we look at family dynamics, most people think that the strongest, most powerful relationships in families are mother, daughter, father, son. But that's absolutely false. The strongest relationships that have the most depth is what we call the cross-sectional relationships: father, daughter, mother, son. So the fact that these mothers were not available to these males, it says a lot. They're angry at women.
Wow.
They don't have respect for women, and they want to use power and control.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing. That is, yeah, that is amazing, because I naturally would assume that father, son, mother, daughter would be, the strongest bond, just based on, tendencies and, spending time, and, the guys are doing sports with the son, and things of that nature. But that's telling right there. That's very telling. So in that aspect, do you think it's more his vitriol for Asian Americans, or do you think it's because of women? Because there are a lot of men who have problems dealing with relationships in all forms with women, whether it is, love interest or communication at work or just basic communication. Many men have a lot of problems expressing themselves and communicating with women.
Yes.
So how do you think it was, and once again, this is you just giving your basic thought, because this is not a patient, so you haven't had a chance to go in depth with this person. But from what you just said, it would seem like women were an important factor in that in that equation that happened.
Most definitely. And it would appear that there was rejection on his part in terms of that parent-child relationship.
Okay.
So the mother may not have been available emotionally. The relationship may have been ruptured early. So this is a person who would have issues with women. Okay. Now, I haven't had an opportunity to delve deeply into the situation, but it does appear that the targets were women.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that says a lot. There's some issues with women. I would want to know if this person had ever established a meaningful relationship with a female. Did he have a girlfriend? Was there any depth to that relationship? How did that relationship walk out? So in a situation like that, I would want to know, what is this person's history with
Right.
women like? Because that's going to give me a good window into what was going on. Okay, I would want to know, did this person have any trauma, as I mentioned, because that's really one of the most important things here.
Sure.
Is that trauma, whether it was direct, indirect, primary trauma, secondary trauma. I would want to know that. I would also want to know what his relationships are like with significant people in his life. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, and obviously what his relationships are like with his parents or his siblings. So you want to do a good psychosocial history on this person.
Right.
You want to find out, has he had problems with poor impulse control? Meaning that this is someone who always acts without thinking. He's
Right.
extremely impulsive. You want to, see if there's any mental illness, mental disorders, mental conditions, whether there was any history of physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, any history of substance abuse, any type of that. You want to see if this is an individual who is antisocial, meaning that he's a loner, he's always by himself, doesn't have too many friends, he's just really introverted, he's disconnected from others, he's not socially active, he's a social misfit. I'd like to know that. Does he engage in voyeurism? Is he exhibitionistic? He's putting himself out there. Is he showing off? Those are important things to know.
Right.
Okay, you just want to know those things about this person. Does he? And here are three important factors about serial killers. If they have a history of fire setting, serial killers tend to be pyromaniacs. They love to set fires. And I think, once again, that's to bring attention to themselves.
Right.
And what's important is serial killers tend to exhibit what we call preteen bedwetting. So they haven't gained bladder control at an appropriate age. So that would tell us that there's a tremendous amount of anxiety going on with this person. Their maturational level has not caught up to their chronological or developmental age. So they're constantly wetting the bed. And then the other important variable about serial killers is that they torture animals. So they lack that empathy, okay? That caring and compassion for others. So those are important factors concerning serial killers. So those are the types of questions that I would like to flush out with this person. Now, in terms of the police and what they're saying, we expect them to craft things in a certain way.
Right.
Okay, because number one, they don't want to alarm.
Yeah.
And they tend not to come to quick conclusions. I've worked with police officers before doing forensics. They take their time.
Yeah.
They don't want to alarm people. But it certainly appears that he was targeting Asian Americans. So what is that all about? It's hard to say. We know that, unfortunately, Asian Americans have been targets, especially since the start of COVID-19.
Right.
There's all the rhetoric that's coming from certain places that, this came from China, all those types of things. So we'll have to wait to hear more from the police. They tend to want to convey things in a very, very forthright and conclusive way, but they do take their time because they don't want to alarm people.
Now, for what you just said, I do agree to a certain extent, but I have seen some police. I don't want to, categorize all police officers, but some police officers in some situations, they are quick to condemn the person that was involved in whatever altercation. For example, some of the traffic stops that has ended in violence and murder, and sometimes when people of color commit a crime, the backstory is that they were a thug, and they show images, the worst images they can find. Sometimes when they're drinking, or things of that nature. When it's not people of color, I see, basic photos, or photos when they're in a suit, or they were at church, or they were graduating, things of that nature. And with media, you can always spin it. Visuals are always important when developing a story. So I don't see photos of him, at his worst. I see basic photos, maybe a mugshot or two, but I don't see the same spin that sometimes it's put on people of color. Now, because I'm a man of color, that might be my bias. But when someone gets killed over a basic traffic stop, it isn't he was a loving father and worked every day, and it was, he had marijuana in his system, or, it is always a spin to demonize that person. But I don't necessarily see a good example is the young man who shot people during the BLM movement that is going to trial now. The young man who crossed the border with weapons and eventually ended up shooting people, and now he's going to trial over it. There wasn't a demonizing of him, so to speak. But for George Floyd, there was even though he had basically committed no crime, except for they were trying to find out about a counterfeit bill, which anyone can get a counterfeit bill just throughout your day, depending on where you spend your money, when you get your change from. But he was demonized that he was a drug addict and all of these other things that really had no bearing on the situation at hand. What do you think of that? Is that because I don't want to demonize police officers and say, well, they're covering anything up, because I would never do that. I love, our law enforcement officers. But at the same time, I do see a difference in how the story is told.
Yeah, there's a lot of veracity to what you're saying. Unfortunately, we're in a society where racism is real.
Yes.
Okay, we can't get away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And we also know that there's preferential treatments for different classes or different ethnicities of people.
Sure.
Police officers have a very tough job.
Mhm.
But here's what's very intriguing. There's a database of words that are correlated. And when the word black comes up, these are the words that's correlated with black. Lazy, shiftless,
Mhm.
violent, aggressive.
Yeah.
Here are the words that come up with whites. Educated, successful, well-skilled, all those positive words.
Right.
So police officers know those words and the correlation.
Mhm.
So when they stop an African American, they're on the defense.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yep.
So racism is built into our way of doing things. There's racism in housing. There's racism in education.
Mm-hmm.
There's racism in the media. There's racism in the criminal justice system. And I can go on and on and on.
Sure.
So people of color, unfortunately, we're at a disadvantage. And that's why we have to be so careful about how we conduct ourselves.
Mhm.
We have to be very, very careful because it's stacked against us.
Right. Right.
So we have to be so careful.
Right. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. As a clinical psychologist, and once again, we are basing this on very limited information, but because the crime was so horrific, it's definitely something that we need to discuss.
Yes.
As far as, for lack of a better term, punishment for this crime. I mean, there are people calling for the death penalty. There are people saying lock him up forever. But then there's also a secondary voice that says, well, if he truly is mentally ill or he has quote unquote snapped, then you don't punish to that degree someone who's dealing with mental issues as opposed to someone who just has hate in their heart. How would you go about figuring out, or if you were called upon to give a recommendation as far as punishment for something like this, knowing that mental issues could be to some degree a factor in what happened, but once again, such a horrific event there has to be some type of punishment for ending 6 to 8 people's lives. How do you make that distinction?
That's a good question. If I was involved in this case, I would be asking some very, very serious questions. Based on the questioning, the history of this person, understanding what he has gone through, obviously this person needs to have some significant consequences. But also, the rehabilitative part needs to be called into question as well. So if we can give this person some help, but also give him some consequences so that he can realize that what was done was totally unacceptable, because you have innocent people who have lost their lives and their family members are in a state of grief now,
Right.
and they may never adjust to what has happened. So we have to give both to this individual. We have to give consequences and we have to give rehabilitation. If mental illness, some of the things that I've mentioned were factors in this individual's life, which I'm very, very confident he was struggling with some major issues that was never dealt with.
Now, for, like you said, before he committed such a horrible crime, internally he was dealing with a lot. We don't know exactly what, but we know that for you to go out and take so many lives in such a way, he had to been dealing with a lot internally. For those around him, what are some of the warning signs or symptoms that you can say, hey, something just isn't right with him, or maybe I should alert someone, inform someone? I mean, I don't, if you're just having a bad day, I don't want to call the police and say, hey, he needs help, he needs a counselor. If you're just having a bad day, everybody gets depressed from now and then. That's just us as human beings. But what factors or what telltale signs would I see that makes me say, you know what, this isn't just having a bad day. This person might really need some help and need it immediately.
Yeah. Well, there's some things that you can look at. Number one, is this person exhibiting erratic behavior? Okay. Is he all over the place emotionally, mentally? 1 minute this person is happy, next minute he's depressed. Is this person getting a good night's sleep? When people don't sleep, that's a window into their mental health. because sleep is how we regulate our mood. It's also how we recalibrate our brain. So is this person's sleep pattern all over the place? Is he sleeping 5-6 hours during the day?
Mhm.
Is he up all night?
Mhm.
You want to look at that. Is this person acting out in terms of substances? Is he using substances in overabundance? Is he up all night drinking, smoking marijuana, using all different types of drugs?
Mhm.
You also want to look at whether someone is struggling with their sexuality,
Mhm.
okay? Because we know that they can be targets of abuse.
Okay.
They can be ostracized because of their sexual orientation.
Mhm.
Is this person a loner? They have no friends.
Mhm.
There's no social connections. They're totally distant from others. They're unable to make emotional contact with other people. And I call this being emotionally bankrupt. Okay? There's no empathy, no regard for others and their feelings. Are they exhibiting severe disrespectful behaviors?
Right.
Mhm.
Okay? So those are the types of things I would be looking for. Are they obsessed with guns? Are they talking about hurting other people?
Mhm.
Pay attention to those types of things.
Okay.
So that should be an indication that, you know what, something's going on with this person. You know, have they recently lost their job?
Mhm.
Okay, what's their financial situation like?
Mhm.
Do they have family support? Are they connected to people? Do they have peer support? But if they're complete loners and they're very, very comfortable with that, take stock of that.
Okay. Okay. If you do exhibit these signs, what do you do as a person that is not a professional or qualified? Do I speak to that person first and find out what's going on? Do I contact a third party, say a counseling? With work, we always have that 800 number that you can call, that they offer counseling options for you if needed. Do you contact a third party first? Do you talk to the person first? And that's a hard subject to broach with someone, that, hey, are you feeling okay? I kind of see that you're kind of off a little bit, or, how do you go about that? And what are your steps that you take?
Right. If you have a good relationship with the person,
Mhm.
then definitely say something. Okay? Depends on the quality of the relationship.
Okay.
The other step might be to talk with someone who knows that person, who you feel has a good relationship with them.
Okay.
So that's another step. Or, depending on the situation, you can approach that person
Okay.
and say something. You know what? I'm concerned, and I'm not trying to be judgmental,
Mhm.
but I don't really know you, but I'm concerned about people, and I'm seeing some things here. Now, would you be willing, or how would you feel if I did this? Or so you navigate your way based on your good judgment and what you're seeing and your overall impressions of the situation. But certainly don't just leave the person there.
Right.
Make a contact with a family or a friend, or you step in as a good citizen, a good Samaritan. I care about you.
Right.
I care about people. and I'm seeing some things, and I'm just wondering.
Right.
Okay.
Now, one of our audience members, Barry Bryant, says that if they're not showing a penchant for harming themselves or others, that even when they're evaluated, they would be released because there's no immediate threat or immediate danger. What are your thought process on that? That, you know, even if you did contact someone, if they're not showing a propensity to harm themselves or harm another person, that they would still be released.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mr. Bryant has a point, because two of the criteria here is that you've got to be a harm to self, a danger to self, and a danger to others.
Okay.
Okay, so sometimes, unfortunately, people do get released because some individuals can be highly manipulative.
Right.
They can be very, very crafty.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, but you still let a family member know, you know what? He went to the hospital and he got checked out. He was released, but I still have these concerns, so I would probably monitor him, or, you know, be in touch with him on a regular basis, because some people are ticking time bombs,
Sure.
but they're crafty enough
Yeah.
to
The system.
disguise certain things.
Right.
So he's got a good point there.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
In this situation, and once again, very limited knowledge, do you see, in situations like this, it's always hard because, like I said, you don't know the background, but do you see immediate jail time for something this horrific? Or, I mean, once again, this is a judgment call without you knowing a lot, but a lot of people say, or a lot of people were saying that because of not a lot of motivating factors that we know of, it sounds like this man was mentally ill, because it's not like he got into an argument. You know, it wasn't a spare the moment thing, that this was something that was almost calculated in nature. So he has to be, and I hate to use this word, but he has to be crazy, because it doesn't seem rational that he would do something, or a rational human being would do something like this unless provoked in some certain way. So do you see immediate jail time for a person like this?
I would hope so.
This is hard to say, because individuals like this, serial killers, are motivated by attention.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them are also motivated by fame.
Mm-hmm.
They want that magnanimity.
Yeah.
They want people to know them, to recognize them.
Okay.
But obviously, based on what I've seen,
Mm-hmm.
this person needs a serious consequence. And he also needs to be evaluated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He needs to be evaluated, a thorough examination. And as I said, I haven't read much on the case,
Mhm.
but I would believe that they will bring in a psychologist and a psychiatrist
Okay.
to evaluate this person.
Okay.
And their findings will be made public, and they will make recommendations based on their findings.
As I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was finished.
Okay.
Yes.
With a person that has these problems, we talked about if you're on the outside looking in, and how would you help a person like this? But if you are the person that is experiencing depression, or experiencing these very harmful, hurtful emotions, what do you do? Because it's easy to say, you know, go get help, but most of us, if we're having a bad day, or we're depressed, or things like that, we self-help to a certain degree, which means that I'm gonna go out with my friends tonight, get in a better mood, or, you know, watch this program I love, or go play sports, or something to get you out of that rut per se. But sometimes it's not that easy, and it's not that simple to self-help. So when do you get to that point where you rationalize that, you know what, I can't deal with this by myself. This is more to it, because most of us, we're prideful in nature. So we're going to say, especially men, I'm going to get
Yes.
through this. I don't, I'm not going to go to my wife and be like, oh, I'm depressed, I'm having a bad day.
Right.
We believe we're made of sterner stuff than that. So we endure, or we persevere when we shouldn't. When should you get to that point where you say, you know what, I need help?
Yeah, that's a good question. Here's a struggle though, Marcelo. Most of us cannot look at ourselves in an objective way.
Very true. Very true.
We're blind when it comes to looking at ourselves.
Right.
Okay. Your wife has a better understanding of you and your struggles. Okay.
Thank you.
Just like Marcelo has a better understanding of looking at
There you go.
Aurora.
There you go.
We're not objective.
Right.
So that's when friends have to step in, or a family member, and say, you know what? This is what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to do something. You may not agree with me, but just humor me and let's go and get some help. Let's go see someone.
Yes.
Okay. But I think we need to do that. And you push that, because we're blind when it comes to looking at ourselves objectively.
Exactly.
So that's when a good friend, a loving family member has to step in, because we can't see ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
That is a very, very good statement. Undoubtedly.
Yes.
Undoubtedly. Well, two topics that we want to cover before we get out of here. First of all, thank you very much for giving us a professional approach and aspect to, something that happened just recently. I know that, like I said, I'm a professional in marketing. So if I'm going to put together a campaign, I need to know all of the ins and outs to put together a campaign. In that same breath, you would need to know more to give a concrete diagnosis of the person. But we thank you for giving us your thoughts on what happened. Very traumatic experience. There's a lot of emotions flying everywhere. I have some Asian friends on Facebook that's like, if they don't give this guy, life or a death sentence, then you can see the hypocrisy of this compared to other situations that have happened. So we do thank you for coming on and giving your expertise in matters of the mind, because this is definitely something that is internal to him that caused this horrific event. I wanted to touch on one or two more things just before you get out of here, because many people probably do not know that you are a sports psychologist as well. I've seen a beautifully done video on Facebook of your thoughts about Tiger, which, not only in the golf community, not only as a celebrity, but especially for the Black community, he is one of our idols. He is one of the, the guys who broke through the racism of the sport of golf, and not only broke through, but was arguably the greatest to do it. So in keeping with that thought processes, my wife says she's Blasian.
You know what? I was going to say the same thing.
Okay.
He's an Asian American, so we can't discredit that at all.
To a certain degree, I totally agree. My sons and daughters are both Black and Asian, and because of how I grew up and how I was taught, I was always under the assumption of that 1% rule, that we didn't make up, that was made up by our oppressors. That if 1% of you is Black, because Black is such a dominant gene, that in turn you are Black as well. So I kind of go by that creed as well, even though my family embraces their Asian culture wholeheartedly. But in looking at that, what do you say, to Tiger? Because as a sports psychologist, he has a very hard road ahead of him if he is looking to get back to the status that he was at. When he had back surgery, no one thought that he would come back and win any of the tournaments. But he did so, and that was inspiring, all-inspiring in nature.
Yes.
But there comes a time when you've conquered and got over so many transgressions and so many hurdles that you say, well, I'm going to get back to a good form of living, but it's more to get back to that professional athlete that he was. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, as you said, Tiger Woods is arguably one of the greatest golfers that has ever played the game.
Yes.
Okay. He's prolific in every sense. Tiger can come back if he wants to come back. And I think one of the motivators for him might be playing with his son on tour. Okay. I think that could be a motivator for him. Okay. Just like for LeBron James,
yep.
LeBron wants to continue to play so that at some point he can play with his son.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's a motivator for Tiger Woods. And Tiger is a man who has always had the odds against him based on certain things that have taken place in his life.
Sure.
But if he wants to come back, I think he can come back because he will have a medical staff that will rival any medical staff. Okay? He will have personal trainers that will rival anyone. Okay? So if he's motivated, and I'm going to say if he's intrinsically motivated, because there's two types of motivation. There's extrinsic, outside of us. You know what? I'm motivated to come back because of the money. But intrinsically, I want to prove something to myself. That intrinsic motivation has inherent value. So I don't know where his motivation is, but if it's intrinsic, he can come back, and I believe he can still dominate because he has a lot of those attributes that you and I can't go and buy. They're innate. This man has been playing golf since he was 2 years old.
Right.
Okay, they tried to tiger-proof the course,
Yes.
and he just laughed at them. Okay, so his skill repertoire is still innate. That can't be taken away. So Tiger Woods, if he wants to come back and prove something to himself or others, he can come back and he can dominate.
All right. There was one more topic that I was going to cover, but I don't think I'm going to cover it.
Why? Go for it.
All right. Okay. So what do you do? And I'm not naming any names, but what do you do when someone suffers from, and I forgot the term that it's called, but it's when you don't get enough sunlight, you don't get enough sun exposure, and it changes your mood. It changes who you are until you get that back.
Yeah.
You just drink milk or you take vitamin D pill because I deal with that consistently.
Yeah. So that's called seasonal affective disorder.
Yes, that's
okay. Yeah. And a lot of people struggle with that. And the major reason why they struggle with that they say laughter is good for the soul. It's good medicine. So here's the reason, is that we get a lot of benefits from the sun. And living in Michigan, especially when the fall comes, we don't see the sun that much. So it affects our mood.
Yes.
So here's a couple things that we can do. Number one, we can change the lighting in the house. The research says that if we use LED lighting, that gives extra brightness, and that will help a person's mood. Okay, so that's the first thing.
Okay.
The second thing is to buy what's called a mood lamp or a sunny lamp.
Okay.
And Philips makes a good product. So what the person does is when they wake up, they put their face in that mood lamp for 10, 15, 20 minutes in the morning. And then they also do that during the evening. Okay, so that's number two. And then number three, we know that if people engage on a consistent exercise schedule, that will help their mood. Because when they exercise, the body is going to replenish itself by secreting what we call serotonin, which is a natural neurotransmitter in the brain. Because one of the most effective antidepressants has serotonin in it. It's called an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And that's one of the most successful antidepressants on the market. But if the person exercises, their brain, their body will produce that serotonin, and they will naturally feel better. So those are the things that need to be done. And if they're done, that's going to help to brighten up that person's mood.
So I have to go shopping is what you're saying.
What's that?
I said, so I have to go shopping is what you're saying.
There you go.
Okay. I have to
Yes.
go shopping for you. All right. All right. I just wanted to get that out there.
Well, so can I tell the story?
Go ahead.
Okay. So since we have you, ironically that we have you. Okay. So last weekend, or was it last week?
Yep.
Okay. I found out that there was this speakers conference in Atlanta that I wanted to attend.
Yes.
And I had just found out about it. And since I'm releasing my book, I wanted to see how other people are doing it and get into the speaking game. And I'm like, went to Marcelo. I said, babe, there's a speaking engagement coming up in Atlanta. I really want to go. Da 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 da. Oh, well, you're not going alone.
No. Wait.
So,
Wait.
you're not a specialist right here, right now.
I would say nothing.
Okay, so we got a specialist right here. You're supposed to let me talk first. Okay. So, babe, I really want to go. Immediately, so we had two different mindset, right? My mind was, I'm going there. Like, I want to go. It's gonna, and so I was set on going. Well, you're not going alone. And immediately in my mind, in his mind, I think he was trying to say that it's because of the safety and what's going on with Asians out there. In my mind, I didn't feel any danger because I'm always traveling alone in the past, right? So, oh, you're not going alone. Okay, well, I'll see if Asia will go with me.
Which is our daughter.
Then come closer to time to leave, we're just going to drive down there because, with 4 people, with 4 kids going on the airplane with COVID going on. So we're like, oh, let's just take a drive. So I text Asia and said, hey, we're going to go down to Atlanta, but we're leaving tomorrow, which is midnight, Friday night. But she's thinking Saturday, right? So she had plans. So it was in the middle of the night when I found this out that she was not going. I didn't want to wake him up. So I'm like, oh, shoot, let me book the ticket because I can always cancel it. It's on my points. Before it goes up or gets sold out, let me book my 9 a.m. ticket to Atlanta. Soon as Marcelo wakes up, babe, Asia cannot go with me now. I'm just going to fly by myself to Atlanta. And, oh, you don't do anything without consulting with me and da-da-da-da. And I'm like, oh, yes, I can, and I'm like, who do you think you are telling me no? That's not. And in my mind, and then I'm like, is it really, this is what pissed him off. I'm like, is it really that you're really concerned with my safety out there? Or is it you got some trust issues and you're scared I'm going down there to do something? And so immediately that's when he got really mad and he's like, you're not going and start getting loud. And now in communication, and communication is key, right? In communication, words are only 7%. When tonals and body language, his body language didn't show me that he cared for me. His body language was angry. So I'm like, I got mad. He got mad. So here we're mad. I'm like, fine, Titi's going with me. So I got my other daughter to ride with me. It's just so ironic that, this thing, hey, it's just so ironic that this thing happened to be in Atlanta with the Asians getting shot down. So now he probably feels some kind of way like, see, I was concerned with your safety.
Let me know when I can speak. That's all I want to know. Can I speak now?
So, yes.
Okay. So, I'm a person that deals in facts. Okay. So I want to start out with the facts. The fact was, when she initially approached me about the seminar, I had no problems at all. No problems at all. I said, go have a good time. Who's going with you? One of your girls. She has traveled with her girls or with the kids everywhere. Okay. So my first response is, you're going to get one of your best friends to go, one of your girls to go. She said, well, I don't know. I'm going to check. Then she checked and she didn't find nobody to go with. So she said, well, I'm going to take Asia. Cool. That was like on a Monday or Tuesday. I said, cool. We didn't have another discussion about it. Excellent. You guys have a good time. I wake up Friday morning about to go to work. And she says, oh, you know what? Plans have changed. Nobody's going with me. I'm just heading out by myself.
So he immediately got mad.
You can't talk.
Okay.
You can't talk. So I said, and I did not immediately get mad. I said, my first response was, do you think that's a good idea? And she was like, why wouldn't it be a good idea? I said, you're traveling alone overnight, driving by yourself, a woman, with everything that's going on, with everything that's going on in the world. I don't know about that. You can't find anybody. Then she said,
I try to get him out.
So then she immediately said, oh, is it that you are concerned about my safety, or you just think I'm going to do something? I've never given you reason to believe, to ever not trust me. And she's right. She has never given me reason to not trust her. So because of that, and because she used to travel for a living, she used to be gone 4 days out of the week traveling for her job. So in that thought process, how could you possibly think that, oh no, I don't trust you, when 4 days out of the week you were traveling and I had no problem at that time? My thing is, with COVID, with everything that's going on, with the Asian community, with a woman by herself, baby girl, you can stop at a gas station and something can happen. And you have no one there to immediately call for help or scream out or honk the horn or anything like that. And I'm telling her all this, and she's like, that's what you say. But I believe it's just that you don't trust me. Now, as a man, I'm mad now because I am trying to display love for my wife. If something happened to my wife, I would be devastated. Okay. So now I'm mad to the point of, I'm like, you know what? Go have a good time. I ain't got nothing to do with it. So now she's mad. She's coming back at me, and I keep telling her, go. Go. She was like, but you're mad. So yes, it escalated into an argument because I gave you my reasoning. You tell me you don't believe my reasoning, and you're telling me what my reasoning is as a grown man. Secondly, my reasoning is based on my love for you, for making sure you're good. She goes with her girls to California, to wherever. I don't never say anything. But because I say something now, and it's something she deeply wanted to do, now it's a problem. So yes, I got agitated. I got mad because I'm like, I'm trying to, make sure my girl is okay. And you're taking it as, I think you're doing something wrong. If you want to do something wrong, you can do it at any time. I'm at work. I have a marketing agency. I'm always on the go. So if you're going to do something, Atlanta has nothing to do with it, So that is the reason why I got mad at that. And also she knows, because in the summertime, she will say, man, every winter we get into an argument. Man, it is, I really think I do have a problem with the sunlight. You have said it. You bought pills even. She bought like vitamin D pills or something like that to try to help out. So in the summertime, she sees that, you know what, I do have a mood change in the winter. But in the wintertime, she doesn't realize that. So now that she came home and all of that stuff happened in Atlanta, I didn't even have to say anything. When she got on the phone with me, her first response was, man, that happened in Atlanta. That probably proves your point, or you think that proves your point. My thing is, from a man's perspective, and this might be wrong, but you always want to protect your wife. I mean, in any aspect, you want to protect your wife and make sure that you do everything in your power to keep her out of trouble. I couldn't go because I had work. We just went to Egypt, so I just spent a majority of my vacation time with us going to Egypt. So I couldn't go. So my thing is, in that aspect, a woman, or she didn't stop and think, let me look at his point. Let me see his viewpoint. I am traveling alone overnight. I'm going to be out of town. Craziness has been happening all over. And this happened in Atlanta.
Yeah.
What is your thought process on that?
So let me say this. From listening to the two of you, both sides didn't really hear each other. They had their minds made up about what they wanted to hear from the other person. Okay, so they weren't really hearing each other. Even though it sounds like Marcelo was being stern by saying, from listening to your wife, that when she told you she wanted to go, you basically said no. Okay, you said you didn't, but that's what she said. So I'm just giving the information based on how I got it. What's that?
I was asking her. I said no initially.
Only if you go with someone.
That is a good point. So I didn't say no. I said someone has to go with you. I don't care who it is.
Right. So here's the thing. I believe that Marcelo was coming from a good place. Even though he didn't say that, you know what, I'm concerned about you going there by yourself. But that's where he was coming from. That's the underlying message that he was giving. So he was coming from a place of concern and love for his wife. And I don't think Laura saw that initially. Okay? So the two of you have to be able to really know each other and understand each other. And be willing to listen to each other. Okay? Because it sounds like Laura was feeling that, you know what, he's not really trusting me here. And that's not where he was coming from. So the two of you have to be able to read each other carefully and not jump to conclusions. And what I always say to couples, no one likes to feel that they're being controlled.
Exactly.
And Laura felt that she was being controlled. Even though her assumption wasn't correct in this instance. But I tell couples, let the person make a decision on their own. Even if you don't agree with it.
Right.
Okay? Because you don't want to be micromanaged.
Right.
Okay? We're individuals.
Exactly.
Okay? If I tell my wife right now who's upstairs, you know what? I want to go to New York tomorrow. She's not going to tell me no.
Right.
She might say, are you sure that's what you want to do?
Exactly.
So we don't try to control each other. Exactly. Because we're adults.
Right.
And that's why I got angry.
But in that thought process, I said after she made it apparent that she thought that my reasoning behind this was trust.
A lack of trust.
I immediately said, go. Have a good time and go. Now she says, well, you said it, but you were mad. Regardless of the fact, I told her, I'm not your dad and you're a grown woman. So if you want to go, go. That was my way of trying to, I've given you my points. If you're still not seeing my points, you're a grown woman, you make your decisions.
Right. But here was the disconnect from her concerning Marcelo, is that in the morning, it sounds like Marcelo got upset. So as she said, he wasn't conveying love at that point.
Right. At that point, you're right.
So she's angry too now. And then it's coming back, well, I guess he doesn't trust me. He doesn't want me to go. But that's why the two of you have to be able to understand where the person is coming from.
Right. And then not to use words like, you can't do this without consulting me.
No,
You
no.
know, those kind of words throw me off.
Right. Because she's not a child.
Right. But in that instance, correct. Maybe the words were not the
But it's
best.
also words and tonals.
Oh, and body
Yeah,
language.
the inflection. Yes.
All together.
But to a certain degree, I still believe that's true. I don't make plans without discussion. If the guys want to take a golf trip, I'm not going to say, bet, let's go, book the trip, let's go. Not to get her approval, but because she is my better half, because we are as one, I want her to know what my thought process is. Hey, the fellas are talking about going to a golf tournament, blah, 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 and get her response. That to me, that is how a couple go through life.
And that's a good analogy, because most men, we will make that decision individually.
Yeah.
Because so that's very good, because the man is thinking, you know what? I don't want to look soft to my friends by saying I got to go ask my wife.
Right.
So they'll make the decision,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll come and tell their wives, and then the wives get angry because the wife is not going to make a decision unless she consults her husband.
Right.
That's how it usually plays out.
Right.
Okay. So the woman will look at the man as, well, you're selfish.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, you got to understand that men and women are at two different dimensions, because the man is focused on independence,
Mm-hmm.
and the woman is focused on intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
So those two suppositions are far away.
Yes.
We want to be independent as a man.
Mm-hmm.
I can make this decision by myself.
Right.
But the woman is, no, I want to make this decision with my husband.
Right.
So we're very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
I want you guys to remember
I usually include you.
Yes.
Like, wait till he wakes up. I usually include you in everything.
Yeah.
My take on this, and she's gonna choke me when we get off here, but with everything you said, you did say, and we can rewind the tape, that in this particular instance, Marcelo was in the right because he was coming from a place of love. She just didn't see that because she was set in her mindset.
No, because of the words and the way that he expressed it.
I'm just going by what the doctor said. That's all.
Yeah. But also too, if I'm being a witness for the Lord,
mm-hmm.
and I'm choking you right now, that's going to affect how my witness plays out.
Yes.
Okay, so she's saying that the words that were used was less than loving words, and the affect and the inflection didn't help the situation. So how we convey things is extremely important.
Definitely.
Okay, it's been my pleasure.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
I was right. Y'all all know I was right. Y'all know he said it. When he said in this instance, yeah, Marcella was right. I could feel her body clench up a little bit. Okay.
That's not what he said.
Yes. Next week we're gonna rewind the tape and just play a certain part. But he said in this instance, Marcella was correct because he was coming from a place of
you just
love.
didn't show it.
I showed it. I think she heard what she wanted to hear. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it all worked out, but the thought process is still that, you know what I'm saying? My wife travels constantly for various instances, and I don't even want to think this, but my wife is in cosmetology and beauty and things of that nature. You know, what if she would have went to that spot and she's by herself and things occur, or anything could occur? That would have killed me. You know what I'm saying? If I wouldn't have said something that was in my heart to say, hey, you need to go with somebody else. I don't care who. You can go with your friends, your girls, your teacher, the girls, whoever. Just go with somebody. Because if something would have happened and I wouldn't have expressed my doubt, then how would I have felt afterwards? Now, initially, like I don't, maybe my wife just thinks she reads me, but I was just waking up in the morning. So if I had a certain mood, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'm in that mood because I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But my reaction after she had said, well, it's a trust thing, is go ahead, do it, do you. You know what I'm saying? You're grown, do you. That was me trying to show that, hey, I'm not here to, control you or anything like that. I'm here to protect you. That's one of my, that's it. When we took our vows before the Lord, that was one thing that was part of our vows, is that I'm here to protect you from any and all harm, period. Whether that is emotional, physical, what have you. And I felt like she was mocking that, that responsibility that I had. She knows that we've been in situations where I'm like, hey, if something happened, you get to the car. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. I just need to make sure you good, and I'll handle whatever situation arises. Because whatever happens to me, I got to make sure my whiz is good.
Yeah.
So that is my thought process always. You know what I'm saying? So that was my thought.
But what's awesome with what just happened is you guys saw a little counseling center, a little counseling session go on. So that is Dr. Lennox Forrest. He is a clinical psychologist. We did leave his information on the bottom, so definitely reach out to him if you guys are going through the sad thing and you're facing some marital issues.
And she got the seasonal thing, so y'all know she was in her mood when I said you got to find somebody, because she in her seasonal thing as well. So y'all see what I go through.
But here's my final message.
Help me, please.
Here's my final message. And this is what one of the speakers said over the weekend. One of the speakers said, there is power in your pain. So basically, it's the growing pains, right? Whatever you are going through in a relationship, if there's conflict, it just usually causes growth. So that was the message over the weekend.
It's women out there right now.
There is power in your pain.
There is women in our audience who's like, oh, he was just trying to protect you, but it's crazy out there. Pandemic is crazy out there.
Men, there's a way to express yourselves to your wives. We see things in two different lenses, and so if you need somebody to talk to, if you're going through the sad thing or relationship issues, call Dr. Forrest.
I was right. I'm feeling so good right now.
Talk to him.
I'm feeling excellent right now.
He is a relationship counselor.
I have been vindicated, okay? You know what I'm saying? Everybody know me. Even when I explain this to my friends, everybody, the first thing they said was, Marcelo, you do get kind of crazy sometimes. Are you sure you didn't nut up? Because you can nut up. But no, I did not. I was protecting my whiz.
But but that incident will make our relationship that much stronger, because now we know how to interact a little better when those situations arise again.
Every winter, right? I'm taking me and the kids, and we gonna go get another house, let her do her thing for the winter, and then we gonna come back as soon as the light hit. Or I'm gonna have to buy her a whole bunch of lamps.
No, remember, we both don't see each other ourselves as how the other person sees us. So we gotta get a third person to tell us.
All right, then, people.
Thank you. Sorry it took a little bit longer, but that ended up, we had to bring it out. I was right, so.
Dr. Forrest. Much love. I was right. You told me right. That's what's up.
That's not true.
All
right, guys. Sorry for going over. We hope you have a wonderful, blessed day. Please be safe out there. All of my family members and our Asian communities are getting attacked. Regardless if it's race or not, there's other evidence that has proven that fact. So please be safe and watch your surroundings, everybody. Have a good one.
Till next week. Deuces.
Bye-bye.